Welcome back to the program agenda. And like I said before the break, our guest for today is a very interesting scientist, professor, and she has a lot to share on the program and to many Filipinos, particularly to Filipinas. We'll go into the intro. Gabriel, roll out the Betamax, please.
Professor Pia Bagamasbad is the director of UP-Diliman's National Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology. Aside from graduating from UP-Diliman, she also trained as a research fellow at the University of Michigan. Bagamasbad has been studying and researching on several types of cancer, including breast and prostate cancer.
Good morning, Professor Pia. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning po. Good morning po. Thanks for having me today.
Okay, first of all, when I was going through some of your personal data, I don't know if this is a stupid comment, pagpasensya mo na. But when I read molecular biology, technology, etc., sabi ko, ayan, kasi hindi mo pinag-aralan yung molecules mo, Beltran, at yung mga atom mo, mayroon palang halaga yung molecules and atoms. I'm just curious, where did this journey into the sciences begin for you?
I think my love for the sciences was really nurtured when I was a high school student. So I studied at Philippine Science High School here lang in Diliman. And then there we're trained we're trained to pursue a career in science, in STEM, diba? Science, technology, engineering, and math. And so when I applied for college here in UP-Diliman, I was going through the list of courses. And then I noticed that there's this course with a very long name, not knowing that it was one of the most difficult courses in UP-Diliman. Kasi di ba parang molecular biology and biotechnology. Parang ang haba, di ba? Parang okay to. So that's what I chose. And then that's how I ended up eventually pursuing a career with this as a focus. So it was my undergraduate college degree. And then I went on to work in different research labs abroad. That's also where I pursued my PhD. And then in 2014, I returned back here to teach in the same institute, where I got my my undergraduate degree.
Okay, was it your gifting or was it a matter of discipline? Because I have discipline and gifting, but most of the time I'm just confused.
I think it's more of you train to be in a position where I am. It's really a lot of years of hard work, being in the lab. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the advantages of getting the chance to have worked abroad. Kasi doon, iba yung first world research, the way that we do research, mabilisan, hindi kailangan sort of free of most of the challenges that we're facing here as scientists in the Philippines. Mabilis yung madaming pera to do research, mabilis namin makuha yung reagents namin, hindi kami hounded by procurement issues, yung mga several challenges that that many scientists here in the Philippines are facing.
Okay, so you saw this course with a very long title. You enrolled, and I'm just curious, ilang math subjects meron yan? Ilang biology subjects? Ilang chemistry?
Nako, madami po. Bago po kami makatapak dito sa building na to, parang lahat ng chemistry, physics, biology, halos lahat ng mga service courses na ino-offer ng mga science institutes na tinitake namin. So madami kaming biology, prerequisites, we call prerequisites, physics, math, we had to go through calculus, and then yon, halos lahat. Parang parang siyang combination of all the different science courses. Tapos we just use all those backgrounds, to do what we do, which is really to study what's happening at the molecular level. So parang, di ba, meron kang cell, tapos yung cells, madami siyang parts dun sa loob ng cell. So yun yung inaaral namin. What's really happening at the molecular level, particularly at the level of the DNA, yung mga ganyan, RNA, mga ganyan.
Yeah, when you start talking about molecules, RNAs, DNAs, I kind of wonder what kind of character you are, what personality you have.
I think for to be a good scientist, you really have to have pay attention to detail. So that's one of the traits that you need. No, you have to really pay good attention to every, even very very small details. And I think you have to have passion and discipline. And I think the most important is curiosity. No, you have to be able to. You have to be curious. Like, bakit kaya nangyayari to, di ba? And then if you're capable of trying to solve a problem, you're trying to figure out how things happen, then that's what you do in the lab. Those are the experiments that you do in the lab to answer certain questions that, that makes you curious, di ba? Parang ganun lang po.
Is it just a mind shift or, shifting your views? Because is it from, I'm a normal person, average person. I see, the landscape. But you, I must say, you look good and you don't have black eyes na dahil sa kakatingin sa microscope. Nung panahon kasi namin, magkaka-black eye. Yun ang practical joke. Ilalagyan ng uling yung microscope, etc. What is life for you?
Well, it's very busy. So I teach here at the university. I do research, which means I have to write research proposals, write research papers, just like the one that was published. And then I do also have administrative work. So it's pretty busy, but I've had years of training. Kasi parang when you're at this level, parang you're just focused on one particular aspect, of a big field. And in my case, it's what I call as molecular endocrinology. So we study hormones and how they affect certain processes within the cell, and in the grand scheme of things, how that applies, for example, disease such as cancer. So yun lang po yung mga inaaral. And I think once you've had it's a lot of years. I've been doing this since I would say, as a job, I would say since I was maybe 23 years old, and that's probably 20 years already. So when you get to that, you've experienced a lot, you've read so much papers na parang meron na siyang medyo hindi na masyadong mahirap, I would say. And a lot of that comes from, the help that I get from my students, right? Because I have students here at the university. They're the ones who actually carry out the experiments. We're here, I help them design the experiments. They carry it out, and then we discuss. So ano ba yung nangyari? Ano ba yung results mo? Ano ba yung meaning nun? Ano yung implications nun? Ano yung big impact noon? Parang ganun po.
You must be struggling on certain days because, when you speak and because you're a professor, I get the impression that you are an enabler. But when I first heard about you and your students, you were a researcher, scientist who goes into breakthroughs in molecular biology and oncology or endocrinology. Sabi ko ng tuloy, walang bulol yun,
Parang work-life balance lang po yan. I mean, I work hard. But in the weekends, I try to spend a lot of my time away from work, not thinking about work. So for me, it's just a matter of compartmentalization. And it's ironic because one of the things that we really study is, for example, how stress or stress hormones produced by our body affects many aspects of, for example, brain development, how that contributes to the risk for cancer. And like you said na po, na parang kami dito, subject din kami sa madaming stressors. I think that's common for everyone na madaming stress sa trabaho, sa personal life. And I really take that lesson to heart na chronic stress is really bad for you. So when you feel like, things are getting a bit too much, then you have to be proactive in trying to step back and reset that high level of stress kasi hindi talaga po siya maganda. So yon.
Okay. In your work, in all the years you've spent studying molecular biology and endocrinology, etc., what is the principal discovery you've made? Because you're talking about stress, how stress triggers disease, triggers physical problems, mental problems. But Is it the brain that tells the molecules, the atoms, etc.? Okay, we have a situation and we got to do this. What is your discovery? Did you find the connection?
Well, there's a lot. That's the thing in our field, no? Parang you make a very, very, very small contribution to the overall knowledge, and for many that's already important. I would say when I was in grad school, when I was doing my PhD, we really looked at, for example, how thyroid hormone and stress hormones, how they affect brain development. Ganon. Kasi alam po natin yung thyroid hormone, importante yan for brain development. If a mother who's pregnant lacks thyroid hormone, mangyayari dun sa anak niya magkakaroon ng mental retardations. If you remember, there was a time wherein pregnant women were actually encouraged to take iodized salt.
Yeah.
Iodine is actually incorporated, part siya ng thyroid, ginagamit siya paggawa ng thyroid hormone ng katawan. So pag meron po tayong deficiency sa thyroid hormone, yung mothers, nagkakaroon ng parang issues with proper brain development yung mga bata in gestation. So yun po yung I think one of my major discoveries is that how the thyroid hormone and how stress hormones act together, no, to affect paano nag-work yung ating neurons or yung cells sa ating brain. So yun po yung isa sa mga discoveries. Where I also had work, ito naman nung postdoctoral fellow ako, na-discover namin na yung isang drug that's already commonly used for treating, for example, breast cancer, may iba pala siyang way na paano niya matutulungan patayin yung cancer cells. So a different an anti-cancer drug, in fact, a chemotherapy drug, no, has another mechanism of how it combats cancer cells. So that's one. Yeah.
Okay, so you were like using this medicine straight path na, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, not realizing that there was a backdoor, that there was also a related activity that also adds to the killing of the cancer cell.
That's right.
Okay, now, what has been your focus and why? Because I heard about you and your discovery of a gene, was it? Related to breast cancer, and I struggle with this issue because practically every 6 months one of my relatives has breast cancer, and just last weekend I received a call from New York, please pray for your so and so because she's got this, etc. And my aunt said, your Lola had it, I've had it, your Tita had it, your sister had it. And I'm like, in the old days, they would call this a curse. And then I hear of this Doctora Pia or this Professor Pia talking about a gene. And I know there are genetic profiling for predispositions. Could you share your journey with us?
Okay. So essentially what we discovered was that this gene, so I didn't discover the gene because this was a gene that I was working on even as, when I was 25 years old as a graduate student. But what we discovered is that how this gene can actually link stress and disruption of the circadian rhythm. So most of our bodily functions are dictated by the light-dark cycle, di ba? So kaya tayo nagigising sa umaga kasi triggered yan by light, kaya tayo inaantok sa gabi kasi wala ng light. And when we shift time zones, like when we fly from here, for example, to the East Coast, baliktad yung time zone, di ba? Our body needs to catch up. Yun yung tinatawag natin jet lag. Kasi our body is entrained to follow the 12-hour light-dark cycle. Now, when that cycle is disrupted, we call it circadian disruption. No? A lot of the bodily processes are also disrupted. No? And what we found is that, in fact, the WHO, the World Health Organization, considers disruption in your normal circadian pattern, yung daylight cycle mo, as a risk factor for breast cancer. So what we discovered is this gene can actually contribute to how circadian disruption and stress hormones can contribute towards breast cancer risk and progression. Yun po yung discovery namin. So breast cancer is fairly complicated. Several women will have breast cancer, but ano yung drivers ng breast cancer nila is different. So yun po yun. That's why we call cancer as a disease of the genome kasi it's accumulated mutations. Madaming pagkakamali po ang dapat mangyari para mag-develop ng breast cancer.
Okay, now, when my sister Marisa got breast cancer, friends on Facebook started reaching out, and something came to the surface that people didn't seem to pay attention to, and it was that a bunch of flight attendants and pilots, mostly flight attendants actually, had said that they all went through, or many of them had breast cancer, and that there was a prevalence of breast cancer among flight attendants. Now, you were interviewed, or you had issued the statement that there is some facts behind this?
That's right. So if chronic exposure to disrupted circadian rhythms, such as women who undergo shift work, yun po, yung kaya flight attendants nga po, like I said, chronically disrupted yung kanilang light-dark cycle, yung regularity ng light-dark cycle nila. Studies have found that there is a connection, or there is an association with disrupted circadian clocks, no, and breast cancer risk. No? So ano po yung implications yan? Yung mga nagda-night shift, for example, no, elder women, there's a higher number of elder women who've had, work in parang shifts, night shifts, no, they're more at risk. The higher yung risk po nila sa breast cancer than women who work the regular day shift. No? Kaya po yun din po yung naging basis kung bakit sinasabi na yan, yung disruption in the normal circadian pattern, yung light-dark cycle, is a risk factor for breast cancer.
Okay, now, these studies, this research that you've conducted, are they laboratory, tabletop type of research, or are they, a population profiling, a study of certain groups, etc.? How did you do the research?
So the research was actually done in the lab, purely in the lab. We used human breast cancer cells that we cultured in the lab. And then we looked at we looked at the genes that should be expressed that oscillates. Dapat parang wave-like yung pattern nila if you track them from 0 hours to 48 hours. So it should oscillate, di ba? Kasi ganun po yung behavior ng what we call as circadian genes, or yung clock genes. It changes with the time of day. So paiba-iba. So parang wave siya dapat. So what we found with this particular gene is that in normal breast tissue, the way that it's expressed is that it oscillates, no? So it has a circadian pattern of expression. It shifts with the time of day, no? But in advanced, highly metastatic breast cancer, you lose that oscillation. Hindi na siya nag-oscillate. So ibig sabihin, in advanced and metastatic breast cancer, the way that your circadian clock genes, or your clock genes are expressed, it's already not normal. No, it's the oscillation is disrupted, and that could contribute to breast cancer. Kasi itong gene na to, what we found is that it prevents breast cancer, the growth of breast cancer cells, pag-spread ng breast cancer cells. So yun po yung isa sa mga, kaya siya, anti-tumor, anti-cancer in nature po yung gene na ito.
Okay, so what you're doing, o yung ginagawa ninyo, is you're researching, studying, investigating the actual breast cancer cells compared to normal cells, healthy cells. So, ang dami po about sa question. Yeah. No, because I remember when my sister was going through the treatments, someone had suggested that magpa-profile, genetic profile, lahat ng girls sa family namin. And medyo, it can be scary. It's good information to know, but it can be scary. What are your thoughts on genetic profiling, and is there really, kasi sabi nung, batang-bata ka, professor, ako medyo, may ano na ako, medyo matanda na ako. Nung panahon namin, they say it's a curse. Hindi, sinumpa yung lahi nila ng may ganyang cancer, o sinumpa yung lahi nila, kanya sila ganito. And now they're saying it's genetic in nature.
That's right. So my take on that is that kung kaya namang bayaran, if you can afford it, go ahead. Go for genetic profiling, because essentially what it does is that it tries to detect mutations in your genes that puts you at risk for certain types of cancer. And kung meron po, yung mutation na po yun, yung pagkakamaling yun, napapasa po kasi yun from one generation, namamana. Kaya sinasabi niyo po yung sinasabi na parang sinumpa. Kasi namamana po yung mutation na yun, napapass on from parent to child, so on and so forth. So I think if one has access to it, if one can afford it, then I would say go ahead and have it done, because based on the genetic profile, you can assess whether you can determine if you are at risk for a certain type of cancer. And then if you are, then you can take the proper measures to try to prevent it. Di ba po? So parang ang example niyan, si Angelina Jolie, yung nanay niya, namatay sa, I think, ovarian cancer. It turns out, meron siyang mutation, you call the BRCA mutation, na nakuha niya sa kanyang nanay, namana niya sa kanyang mom, no? So even before she developed cancer, which she would have probably at a very young age, no? Diba, she was a bit more aggressive. She had the mastectomy done, pinatanggal niya yung breasts niya.
Yeah.
Hindi na magkaroon ng cancer. And I don't know if she had an ovarectomy done, if she had her ovaries removed para tanggalin na yung risk na magkaroon siya ng breast and ovarian cancers. But I think that's a little bit more aggressive, too aggressive, I think, in my opinion, because there are other measures that you can take, like lifestyle changes, di ba? Kasi, yun po. Parang it's good to have, it's good to know, and then it's good to be a bit more proactive in trying to prevent what could eventually happen, or most likely will happen.
Is there any hint or suggestion that this cancer, it's a gene, I think, am I correct? No, it's a gene, and it can be inherited. But are the triggers really physiological, chemical, or yung sinasabi mong lifestyle? Kasi the circadian rhythm, yun yung gaano kadalas kang matulog, anong oras ka nakakatulog, that's lifestyle.
That's right. So, like I said, yung cancer po, parang kailangan may mga at least dalawa or tatlo na genes na ma-mutate, na magkamali. Kung isa lang, hindi po yun enough to develop cancer, kasi our cells have a mechanism to try to address all these mistakes. So several mistakes have to happen, for cancer to develop, because if it's just one or two, our cells have an inherent mechanism to repair those mistakes.
Okay.
Now, when one or two mistakes have already occurred, and then you compound that, parang dinagdagan mo pa dahil dun sa lifestyle na hindi masyadong healthy lifestyle. And what do we mean by that? For example, exposure to chemicals, smoking, yung pagsisigarilyo, nag-intake ka it produces chemicals that are harmful to your cells. Yung pag-iinom ng alcoholic beverages, masama din po yan, kasi it generates chemicals within our cells that can lead to accelerating the occurrence of those mistakes. Yung pag-disrupt ng ating circadian pattern, yung sleep, light-dark cycle natin, magko-contribute din po yun sa pagkakaroon ng mistakes within our cells. So, it's like an accumulation of mistakes before something as bad as cancer will happen. So, there are things that we cannot prevent, like pag namana natin sa magulang, wala na tayong magagawa din, minana na natin eh. Pero yung mga lifestyles po, yung exposure to mutagens, or yung risk, yung mga risks that make those mistakes, that can to cancer, yun po yung mga pwede nating iwasan.
Okay. Professor, we'll go for a 2-minute break. When we come back, I want to find out your research. Has anyone suggested that you expand it to a wider population? Kasi, security guards are close to my heart. People who are working in the call centers are close to my heart. People who drive cabs and do 24-hour shifts, they were the first thing that came to my mind. And we're only talking about breast cancer at the moment. How does this lifestyle mistake, translate to the lives of others? We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back here on Agenda. Okay, welcome back to the program Agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran, and we are having a very interesting, very informative discussion with Professor Pia Bagamasbad, who is a PhD in molecular cellular development biology at from the University of Michigan, and also director of the National Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology. Binasa ko na, Prof, kasi sobrang haba. Parang yung course na pinili mo.
Oh, mahaba talaga.
Okay, before the break, I mentioned my concern for security guards, for 24-hour shift drivers, for call center agents, etc. Na lalo na yung call center, I keep seeing them in restaurants, na 24-hour restaurants drinking beer at 6 in the morning kasi hindi raw sila makakatulog.
That's right. So, wala pa po kasing studies yan. And I think that's something that we can actually do. Of course, any research project or research undertaking requires funds, no? So that we need to apply for research grants for that. But I think it's a very good study for us to try to figure out ano po ba yung incidence or yung prevalence ng, for example, for in our particular interest is, for example, breast cancer, no? In among BPO workers. Wala po tayong data tungkol dyan. So dapat po siguro na it's time for us to do what we call as epidemiological studies, no? Titingnan mo kung ano ba among BPO workers na nag-shift work, ano ba yung risk nila for developing particular types of cancer. For women, breast cancer. For men, prostate cancer. So bakit ba yung dalawang yun lang yung interested kami? Kasi hormone-driven cancers po sila. Diba? Yung hormones natin, yung estrogen, testosterone, and yung pag-release po kasi ng hormones, regulated din sila, kinokontrol din sila nung light-dark cycle. So parang ganun po yung connection nila. Pero kung ano po yung incidence, kung gaano ba kadalas dun sa mga BPO workers, madami ba sa kanilang nagkaka-breast cancer or prostate cancer among men, wala po tayong data tungkol dyan. Hindi po natin masagot sa setting ng Pilipinas. So, one thing that we can do. Now, yung question po ninyo, for example, yung mga security guard o yung mga lalaki naman, kung at risk ba sila sa prostate cancer, that's a question that we can actually answer here in the lab. So, baka po isang possible research project yan na pwede pong i-propose sa mga nagpo-fund ng research projects namin.
Okay, so speaking of research, clearly you have breakthrough research. You're accomplishing something, and you are enabling many of our young students to follow the path. But what are the incentives for people like you and your students? Do we have sufficient amount of scholarships for? And I'm just being funny about this now, who are crazy enough to pursue, courses that are 7 words.
Madami po. At pag estudyante po kayo dito sa UP-Diliman, wala pong, in any state university, wala pong tuition, di ba? So actually, ang pera po namin na ginagamit para magawa itong ganitong mga klase ng research, galing din po sa government. No? So we get it from the Department of Science and Technology. And once na naging estudyante namin sila dito, fully funded po yung research nila. Wala po silang nilalabas na pera. Kami po yung nagpo-provide ng lahat para magawa nila yung research na yon. Doon naman po sa tanong kung madami pong interested, magugulat po kayo, madami. Madami pong interested. Lalo na nung pagkatapos ng pandemic, di ba, na yung RT-PCR, lahat na alam word ng RT-PCR. And in fact, RT-PCR is a technique that we used in that paper that we just published on breast cancer and circadian disruption. So those are the techniques that we use here.
I understand that even during the pandemic that you and your associates had developed a certain protocol or system. Pasensya ka na, hindi ko masyado naintindihan eh. Ikaw na mag-explain.
Nung ano lang po, I think during the pandemic, what we did was we trained the medtechs on how to do RT-PCR. So this is in April of 2020, during the peak of the pandemic. And we needed to test. We needed to run the RT-PCR test to determine kung para malaman kung sino ba yung infected, kung para maiwasan yung pagkalat. Now at that time we had very little. The country only had like 3 or 4 testing labs, and we really had to capacitate, a lot of the testing labs to be able to run RT-PCR, the RT-PCR test. And that's what we do here. Actually, in MBBS, we do a lot of RT-PCR experiments. So, yun po yung ginawa namin. Tumulong kami para mag-train ng mga medtech paano gawin yung RT-PCR testing.
Okay, now, are you limited to human concerns, human diseases, genome, etc.? Or kasi, one of the biggest problems we have right now in the country is ASF. And people are saying, hindi pa kaya ng Pilipino yan, but why are we relying on Vietnam and America to develop something or to better understand this virus?
Here in our institute, there's a lot of expertise. Meron po kaming agricultural arm. So mga scientists like me that deal with agricultural issues. So for example, yung time dati yung kokolisap, meron po kaming scientists dito who worked with that. Meron din po kami yung mga viruses na nag-affect ng mga tobacco plants. madami po. That's one expertise that we are lacking right now, is actually a virologist expert who can deal with the African swine flu. But I believe in UPLB, they have that expertise, no, to deal with a lot of those agricultural issues. But here in UP-Diliman, yan po ang hinahanap namin dito sa aming institute, is actually a scientist, no, who's willing to be the in-house expert on virology. But madami po kami agricultural biotech aspects, meron po kaming faculty dito na yun naman po ang inaaral nila.
Okay, now what about in terms of support, funding, etc.? You said that there is sufficient fund for students, for future scientists, and the doors are open, and there seems to be an interest. But what about research funding?
So I'm sorry, I have to take that back. I mean, there isn't that, hindi naman siya sapat na sapat yung aming support. We just try to make it work. No, we try to
okay.
The money that we have, we try to support the students that we have. But definitely, we could use a lot more funding support. No, kailangan po namin kasi yung mga experiment namin medyo mahal po. Ang isang experiment umaabot ng mga 100,000, depende 200,000 pesos sa isang experiment.
Kayo ba open door to funding? Because there are institutions where they say, well, no, we won't deal with pharma, we won't deal with animal medical groups, etc. Or we parang may mga clauses and restrictions. What about in your institute?
Just as long as open po kami for funding support from different agencies, no? But I think we get most of our funding support from the other government agencies like Department of Science and Technology, Department of Agriculture, DENR, kasi they really provide substantial funding support, no, to be able to carry out the work that we need to do. Ang nagiging problema lang po dahil gobyerno to government, syempre we're subject to a lot of the procurement rules, yung tinatawag na COA rules, kaya medyo nagtatagal po yung progress ng trabaho namin. But definitely we could use a lot more, and I think given that there's a lot of interest in the kind of work that we do here, no, I think that we would really benefit if we get support to try to expand our facilities, so that we could get more students, we could get more faculty, and we could train more Filipinos, no, to pursue the kind of work that we do. Because I think it's very important. A lot of the first world countries actually gauge their progress based on the number of scientists per X number of based on their population. So for example, dapat meron kang isang PhD researcher or scientist per 100,000 people. Sa atin po parang we're 10 times less, maybe even 100 times less of that measure. So kailangan po ng tulong ng I don't know, funding support from the government, from the private sector to help support the kind of work that we do and training the young scientists, no? Yun po.
Well, Professor Pia, the program agenda and my column in Philippine Stars, myself, are open to any support you require in media, and kung saan man kami makakatulong, please let me know. And I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, because if a young person such as yourself is now heading the institute and being an enabler to students at UP, I'm sure we have a future, and we really are here behind you. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Pia, and please keep up the good work and very interesting conversation. I hope to spend more time with you on the program.
Okay. Thank you din po. Magandang umaga po.
Okay, that's Professor Pia Bagamasbad, of the Director of the National Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology. Okay, so sorry, hindi na umabot ang question ninyo, Gab, but we are going to have to end our program with our closing blessing. But we will try to get Professor Pia back and also her students very in the near future, because Women's Month pa nga, and then also, bright minds are very inspiring. Okay, let's go to the blessing for this week, and it comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 13. And this is the blessing I have chosen for you, our viewers. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail, and you shall only go up and not down, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, being careful to do them. I ask all of you, please reflect on the Word of God, the promise of God, and your relationship with God. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Please keep it here on One News.